like every time I make one of these videos, I out myself a little bit. But here I am, an advocate for vulnerability. Hi, it's Day, and I like insane male leads. And maybe we can skip over the court case for now, but I do hope to share my favorite lineup of insane, a little loopy, and bonkers male leads from manhwa. Anyways, the order I'll be discussing these male leads will be in the order of how insane they are, so they will progressively get worse. Disclaimer, there are sensitive topics and imagery like violence, blood, gore, manipulation, and or abuse in all the series I will mention, so if you are faint-hearted, I suggest clicking off this video and waiting for my next upload. If you ever reach a point where you're seriously side-eyeing me and my taste, you can easily click off as well. Alrighty. Let's start easy. Easy with the series, The Villain's Savior. Now that I'm thinking about it, this series is probably what started my descent into insanity. I read it when manhwa was still fresh and new, and at that time, I couldn't really think of an insane male lead that stuck out to me. So stumbling upon The Villain's Savior and experiencing its first few chapters, the dread and fear I felt towards Asif, even more so after I found out he was the ML, was refreshing. I was excited. It wasn't anything like I read before, and I was seated to read more. Our story starts out like any other otome isekai, where our female lead falls into her favorite novel. Her favorite character at that time is the tragic antagonist of the story. He's had a rough probably doesn't even summarize it. A traumatic upbringing causing him to be quite twisted and murderous. It was the only way for him to escape the abusive household he was forced into, and his defensive habits carried on through his lifestyle. Elze, our FL, is a soft-hearted and quite the emotional reader. Not only does she grieve for Asif and his unfair treatment, as soon as she wakes up in her favorite novel, her knee-jerk reaction was to find Asif and claim him as her soulmate. Yes, claim the murderer as your soulmate. So in this novel she's brought into, there's this seal that appears on you once you're fated to be with another. Elze, being the young girl that she is, immediately clings onto the hope that her fated partner is the tragic villain in order to save him from his fate. Did I mention she was emotional? Because honestly, emotional is such a light way to put Elze. She is, how should I put it, a crybaby? She cries a lot, like probably in every chapter, and this might be a turnoff for some readers, but I absolutely love her. Because despite her tears, it doesn't stop her from accomplishing her goals, which is to save the villain. It's also her vulnerability that throws Asif for a loop, because who is this random woman who's grieving for him and the things that haven't even happened to him yet? And Asif, despite his past crimes, is soft towards her tears. And of course, the only way he can think of expressing these brewing feelings is to manipulate Elze to stay with him, of course. Yes, manipulate. But it's funny because of the dramatic irony. Elze knows she's being manipulated. Elze knows he's the villain. Of course he's evil, but she loves him the same and allows him to pull the strings behind her. Now, hear me out. Hear me out. Asif is not that bad. He's the first one on this list for a very good reason. He genuinely has Elze's best interest, unknowingly, and is also respectful of Elze's boundaries, only when she's watching. He's also quite the romantic and has me kicking my feet in certain scenes. Personally, I just love these two and their stories, and I would consider it a classic within otome isekai. So it is definitely worth a read if you are a fan. Next up on my list is turning the mad dog into a genteel lord. To start off, this series is not an otome isekai, so it is something different. Instead, we follow our female lead, Dairen, who is a very powerful priestess. But she is unfortunately still stuck at the bottom of the hierarchy due to her poor background. As a result, she is often pushed to do the dangerous work, such as serving in war. Once the war ended, a specific battalion, the 8th Battalion, made of super soldiers, were driven and left to suffer in madness as an after effect of both their training and the battlefield. Of course, Dairen is assigned to one of these former soldiers, and if she fails to rehabilitate him, she dies, most likely in his hands. Meet Saris, former war hero of the 8th Battalion. He's extremely sensitive to noises, mostly to people, and to any threat really. For the war, he was trained to have heightened senses, but an unfortunate consequence of this skill is constant overstimulation, causing Saris to be aggressive, ready to attack at anything, even Dairon, or a random bird that flew by his window. After a few attacks, Ceres does warm up to Dairon. Not without injury though. It is a constant battle against his extreme aggression and trauma from war. Despite the series just having a little over 40 chapters, it has already been such a fun ride to see the shenanigans Dairon and Ceres gets up to. It does get wacky and over the top at times, but I love to see it, and it's easily given me good laughs through every chapter. The plot doesn't falter either. Slowly, the story reveals the darker side of the war that they had just won and its effects on the soldiers from the 8th Battalion. There might even be a connection with the priestess's holy power and the soldiers' current condition. Or should I say, current spell they're under. I really don't know because I am still guessing and hoping for the future chapters. Also, the art. Hello. Scrumptious, amazing, show-stopping. Thank you very much for the meal. In retrospect, Ceres is not threatening either, if you have Dairon's level of holy power, of course. Morally speaking too, Ceres has no intention of hurting the people around him. He is quite literally a victim of circumstance, and I'm genuinely rooting for both Dairon and Ceres to have their own happy ending. Now, we're getting to my favorite MLs of all time, and with good reason. The next 3 series have MLs that make me hold on to this title quite proudly, if I say so myself. Villains are destined to die. I will never not talk about this series on this channel. It's one of my all-time favorite manhwa, maybe even out of all the manga I read because of just how engaging all the MLs are. In all honesty, all the MLs in this series are a little out of it. Just a little bit, but that's what makes it more interesting to read. If I had to recommend just one series out of this whole video to immediately pick up for a fun time, I would choose this series. If that doesn't convince you, let me introduce you to just one of the love interests, my absolute favorite, Callisto Regulus. Just for a little bit of context, our female lead Penelope is isekai'd into her favorite otome game. But instead of the main character, she plays the role of the tragic villainess, Penelope Eckert. And now she has to earn the affection of all the love interest in the game in order to simply live and survive. She has very little hope of returning to her world though. Since she's in an otome game, there's also a lineup of just as insane love interests besides Callisto, but we'll save that deep dive for another time or else I'll be here forever. But trust me, they are all worth getting to know. Now, where was I? Callisto. Meet the crown prince of the Orca Empire. Despite his position, he is constantly targeted by the other royal nobles and has faced multiple assassination attempts. This causes him to be quite distrustful of others, even resorting to violence or murder at any sign of a threat. And during Penelope's first few plays of the game, she failed to get past Callisto's character, dying by his sword over and over again. So as the newly reincarnated Penelope Eckert, Penelope decides to do the most logical next step in order to escape her suffering in-game. Let's try to get killed. She is to get killed by Callisto's sword, the quickest and easiest way to go in-game, and surely she'll be able to reset, right? But as Callisto's sword meets her neck, the reset button isn't anywhere to be found. In fact, the blade is feeling a lot more real than she expects, and Callisto's eyes are dead set on killing her on the spot. In a panic, Penelope racks her brain, and in one fell swoop, 3 words fall out of her mouth. I like you. And it works! Penelope is just that good, you know? And she is! Slowly but surely, Penelope faces Callisto a few more times and continually catches his interest because of her blatant lies and manipulation. It's funny to see her fumble her interactions with Callisto over and over again, but instead of losing attention, she's met with his increasing affection gauge. How could he not? I don't blame Callisto. Penelope is so cool, and she's always taking action to fend off monsters, fend off the prince, fend off her brothers, fend off virtually anyone who's a nuisance to her, and Callisto recognizes her efforts, unbeknownst to Penelope of course. And as Penelope gets to know Callisto more, beyond his murderous demeanor, he's actually quite the free spirit, and he isn't as insane as I'm probably painting him out to be. The only reason Callisto poses a threat is because he's constantly on guard. But if you're able to earn his trust, Callisto is a dependable and powerful ally, especially towards Penelope, who seems to always be putting up a front to everyone else in this world. She has to earn their affection after all. But for some reason, Callisto puts her at ease. With Callisto, she can be unapologetically herself. With Callisto, she's actually the safest in the game. Amongst the constant death threats and actually near-death experiences she's had with him, it's ironic, right? I say well written. Can you tell I like Callisto? I know, I have said that I am extremely biased towards the Crown Prince, and it is true! But, for good reason though. Don't look at me like that. Next up on my list is actually someone a smidge higher in rank above Callisto when it comes to my favorite MLs. I know, right? Someone beat Callisto, but on top of being crazier, the next character is also uniquely designed, hilarious to read, and a magician. Just look at him. Look at him. Do I even need the words to justify myself? He's from I Failed to Oust the Villain. Meet Reinhardt. Our story opens up with a literal massacre. The culprit is Reinhardt, the villain of the story. And our female lead, Valida, the supporting character that assists the villain, stands listless at the bloodshed, wondering what went wrong. He's alive, yes, but what made Reinhardt so attached to her? Originally, Valida is to die at Reinhardt's hands. He simply uses her as a stepping stone, as is quickly discarded after deemed as useless. But the current Valida, who is isekai'd into this novel, is determined to change her fate. Multiple times she's created opportunities to free Reinhardt. Multiple times she saved him through their abusive household. But Reinhardt, to the very end, stayed by her side. Is this a good thing? It's a good thing, right? Well, let's just say Reinhardt is the type to occasionally fantasize over snapping Valida's neck. But he doesn't, because that'd be no fun. Ha! He also curses her with a seal so she doesn't leave his side after murdering her whole household. Which is all cool cause deserved, but also now she's essentially his prisoner. This is it. This is the point where I will politely ask you guys to look away because I wholeheartedly admit that I was kicking my feet the whole time this was happening. Just look at the way he looks at her. Just... I can't explain it. I can't explain it. The best part about this series is, unlike the previous male lead, Reinhardt actually goes through a significant character development, along with our female lead, Valida, to which I personally haven't spoken much about, but she deserves all my roses and hugs too because I absolutely love her. I love how both Reinhardt and Valida are written, and just how broken they are coming from such an abusive childhood and household. Essentially, it is them versus the world, because no one else in this world is as twisted as them. As much as it hurts to see them hurt each other, hurt themselves, hurt others, the series still somehow keeps me hopeful that one day they'll be happy. One day they'll learn to love, to live. I cried multiple times seeing Reinhardt and Valida navigate their newly found freedom. The series is a whole lot more than gore and a whole lot more than romance. Though I haven't finished reading it 90 chapters in, I'm still super rooting for the characters and the journey that they're on. And my heart just feels... Speaking about them, I just love them. I love them a normal amount, I swear. They're just my children. Please let them be happy. Now, for our final series, I'm happy to present the most insane, the most manipulative, and the most possessive male lead on my list. Meet Damien Ernst von Thiessen from Betrayal of Dignity. Out of this list I have presented today, I put Betrayal of Dignity as the most mature of the series. It really does read like a period piece, and it takes a bit of nuance and patience to grasp the themes, but that's what makes it so good to me, and why Damien is such a memorable male lead, despite being such an abomination, and I say that endearingly. Our story begins in the midst of war. Chloe, our lovely female lead, despite struggling with her crippled leg, assists as a medic with the soldiers. One night, she stumbles into Damien, the commander of the Imperial Army, and he calls her a nuisance! Right from the get-go, right from their first meeting. And worse, he pulls her crane away from her. Clearly, Damien is rude right from the get-go, and Chloe calls it out. They don't have a pleasant encounter, nor do they have a pleasant second encounter, nor a third one. However, Damien has a goal, and it leads to Damien and Chloe's betrothal. I'd love to explain more, but if I go too deep into detail, it really veers into spoiler territory. And trust me, a summary cannot do justice to how the artist executes the story narrative. Let's just say every chapter had me like this, and whenever I thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. It exponentially did. And regardless of the gleaming red flags everywhere, I couldn't help but still sympathize with both Damien and Chloe. The worst part is they both actually love each other and it hurts to see them hurt, but also it's very much self-inflicted. And I do not exaggerate, Damien is genuinely terrifying. Funnily enough, he isn't a murderer like the other MLs on this list. He hasn't outwardly hurt Chloe, he doesn't present himself as a villain, and he has an honorable reason to be doing the things he's doing. The most terrifying part of his character is probably the fact that he loves Chloe a lot, and he's going to do whatever it takes to have that love reciprocated. It's terrifying because it's rooted so close to reality that sometimes my mind wanders to a place of what ifs. What if I was in Chloe's place? What would I do? What if someone held this twisted love for me? Would I reciprocate? Seldom do I ever get lost in these what if scenarios, but again, all the credits to both the author and artist framing the series in a way that feels real. These characters do not feel like caricatures, and like real people, there are both good and bad sides that we learn to love or hate about them. And this philosophy is consistent with all the characters in the series, even the side characters. One chapter, we could be trusting a character, the next chapter, they're vile. Then many chapters later, we're trusting them again. It's a fun ride. It's a great series, and currently it's incomplete, so I'm excited to see how it all wraps up in the end. This video felt very cathartic to me. And I think often morality is so instilled in media, especially these days, that great stories like the ones I talked about slip through the cracks, never to be discussed or appreciated. And yes, I acknowledge there are a lot of trash stories that have characters with the same abusive tendencies as the male leads I talked about. But I'd never talk about those stories in the first place, so you're safe with me. And if you guys want a more in-depth opinion on these red flag male leads, here's another video I made about them. And if y'all have any more series with well-written red flags, well-written, you know, pass it along. This is a judge-free zone. I got you. And also, I just really want to read more. This has been Day signing out. Keep on dreaming, peeps. Bye!